I am 78 years old, and I need to tell you something that nobody told me when I was your age. Not my mother, not my teachers, not the women around me who looked strong but were quietly exhausted. For most of my life, I truly believed that being a good woman meant saying yes. Yes to my husband, yes to my children, yes to my parents, yes to my friends, yes to my boss. That I thought that was love. I thought that was strength. I was wrong about almost everything. When I was young, I didn't question it. Saying yes came naturally, almost automatically. It was praised. People smiled at me and said, "She's such a good girl, such a devoted wife, such a selfless mother." Those words felt like medals. I wore them proudly. Even when they were heavy, I didn't know back then that every yes I gave to others was quietly becoming a no to myself. I grew up in a time when women were taught to be useful before being happy. We were told that our value lived in how much we could give, how well we could serve, how quietly we could carry the weight of everyone else's needs. Nobody ever asked us what we wanted. And eventually, we stopped asking ourselves to be why the time I was in my 20s, pleasing others felt like breathing. I didn't even notice I was doing it. If someone needed help, I showed up. If someone disagreed, I backed down. If something made me uncomfortable, I swallowed it. That's what good women did. And so, without making a conscious decision, I began chasing perfection. That I wanted to be the perfect wife, patient, supportive, understanding, never demanding, the perfect mother, always available, always sacrificing, always strong, the perfect daughter, grateful, obedient, quiet, the perfect employee, hardworking, reliable, never complaining. Perfection became my identity. And identities like that are dangerous because they leave no room for rest. At first, it didn't feel like a problem. Life was busy. There were meals to cook, children to raise, bills to pay, schedules to manage. I told myself I was needed, and I was. But being needed is not the same thing as being known. Sometimes, late at night after everyone was asleep, I would sit alone and feel something I didn't have words for. A small, uncomfortable emptiness. A question I didn't want to hear clearly. Did I ask this it? Is this all I am? I pushed those thoughts away. Good women didn't question their lives. They were grateful. So I reminded myself of all the things I had. A family, a home, stability. I told myself wanting more was selfish. Over the years, the yes kept coming. Yes, I'll handle it. Yes, I can wait. Yes, it's fine. Yes, don't worry about me. And slowly, almost invisibly, something began to grow inside me. Exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles into your bones. Along with it came resentment. Quiet resentment, the most dangerous kind, because I didn't even allow myself to admit it. That I resented being expected to always be available. That I resented being strong all the time. That I resented how invisible my own needs had become. But instead of listening to those feelings, I worked harder at being perfect. I smiled more. I gave more. I shrank myself further. Nobody warned me that perfection has a price, and that price is yourself. To be why the time I realized something was wrong, decades had passed. I had spent years living a life that looked good from the outside, but didn't feel like it belonged to me on the inside. I had done everything I was told a good woman should do, and yet I felt strangely empty. I didn't understand then that a life built entirely around others eventually leaves you with no place to stand. I didn't understand that saying yes to everyone teaches them that your time, your energy, and your dreams are endlessly available. That I thought I was being loving. That I thought I was being strong. That I didn't know I was disappearing. And that is where my story truly begins. Let me take you back to when I was 22. It was 1968, a very different time. Women didn't have the choices that young women have today. or at least we didn't feel like we did. Society, family, and even our own upbringing told us that a good life meant a good husband, a steady home, and a family to care for. That was it. That was all my mother, a strong woman in her own quiet way, said to me one evening. A good husband is all you need. Everything else will follow. I trusted her. She had lived her life that way, and I assumed it had worked for her. So I married him. A kind man, honest, and a good provider. I believed I was making the right choice. And in many ways, I did. He loved me. We built a home together. But somewhere along the way, I made a silent agreement with myself that I would always be the good wife. I cooked his meals. I cleaned his clothes. I made sure the children were dressed, fed, and schooled. I supported his career in every way I could, cheering quietly from the sidelines while my own ambitions gathered dust. I smiled when it was expected. I stayed quiet when I was told to stay quiet. And I waited. Always, I waited. At 35, I felt the stirrings of a dream I had carried for years. I wanted to go back to school. Literature had always captivated me. I dreamed of teaching, of writing, of exploring worlds through books and words. I imagined classrooms, discussions, and the thrill of ideas sparking in my mind and others. But when I spoke up, he told me, "We can't afford it right now. The children need you. Maybe later." And so I waited as the years passed. I reminded myself again and again that this was not truly waiting. It was being responsible. At 45, when the children were older, I brought it up once more, but then his retirement plans and his parents' needs came first. I waited again. At 55, I thought it would finally be my turn. Yet our daughter went through a divorce, and the grandchildren needed me. I told myself, family comes first. And once again, I waited. I didn't realize it at the time, but each later was a tiny surrender, a quiet compromise that chipped away at the edges of who I was. The girl who had dreams, who loved words and stories, had been buried slowly, invisibly, until she became almost a stranger to me. Through all these years, the voice in the back of my head persisted, asking, "Is this it? Is this all there is?" I ignored it. I dismissed it as selfishness. I told myself that selflessness was noble, that being a good woman meant putting others first. And so, I kept saying yes. Yes to obligations, yes to family demands, yes to postponing my own life indefinitely. Did I convince myself that one day, when the right moment came, I would finally live for myself? But as the decades passed, that right moment never arrived. Life has a cruel habit of filling up the space you leave empty. There was always someone who needed me, always a responsibility, always another reason to wait. I end those years. I learned what many women of my generation learn. The world does not give you permission to live for yourself. You have to take it. But I did not yet know this. I continued to live in the shadows of others' needs, believing that this was love, that this was duty, that this was enough. I thought being a good woman meant being invisible in your own life. And I was excellent at it then. At 71, the life I had spent decades waiting for came abruptly and painfully. My husband died. After 42 years of marriage, he was gone. And suddenly, there was nobody left to wait for. For the first time, I was alone, not lonely, though that came too, but truly alone. And for the first time in decades, I was forced to confront a terrifying question. Who am I without him? Who am I without everyone else's expectations? What do I actually want? I had spent 60 years being someone else's wife, someone else's mother, someone else's helper. I had built my life around other people. And now, The mirror reflected a woman I didn't recognize. She was tired. She was worn. She was quiet, and she was completely unclaimed by her own desires that I realized, with a shiver of fear, that I had no idea how to live for myself. All those years of waiting had led me to a place I had never imagined, a place of utter emptiness, staring back at me, with no guide, no roadmap, and no instructions, and that is when the next chapter of my life began. The chapter of rediscovery, regret, and the slow, painful, but ultimately liberating reclamation of who I truly was. When he died, I thought the hardest part would be missing him. And I did. Oh, how I did. But that wasn't the part that broke me. The part that terrified me, the part that truly shook the foundation of my life, was facing myself. For 42 years, my identity had been tied to being his wife. I had loved him, yes, but more than that, I had defined myself through him. I was the helper, the supporter, the one who adjusted, accommodated, and smoothed over. I had spent so many years perfecting the role of good woman that I had no memory of the woman underneath it all, and now, suddenly, she was staring back at me from the mirror. A stranger. I looked at my reflection and thought, who is this? Who have I become? I saw exhaustion etched into every line on my face. I saw a sadness that wasn't just about losing him, but about a life I had postponed, a self I had ignored. I saw someone who had spent decades pouring herself into everyone else and had nothing left for herself. The first year after he passed was the loneliest year of my life. I had no one to serve, no one to take care of, no one waiting for me to cook, to clean, to guide, to smile. For 60 years, my existence had been wrapped in the needs of others, and suddenly all those threads had been cut. I felt untethered. At first, I floundered. I tried to fill the silence with small tasks, busy work, anything to avoid the question of who am I without everyone else. But that question would not be ignored. It echoed through every quiet moment, every empty room, every hour I spent alone with my thoughts. And then, almost by accident, I found a letter. It was one he had written before we were married. I had forgotten about it over the decades, tucked away in an old drawer. I opened it with trembling hands. In it, he wrote about me, about my intelligence, my curiosity, my laughter, and the dreams he hoped I would follow. He talked about how he couldn't wait to see the woman I would become, the life I would create, the passions I would pursue. I sat on the floor holding that letter and cried. Because I realized the truth. The girl he fell in love with, the one full of curiosity and fire, I had buried her. Slowly, subtly, over the years, I had set aside my desires in the name of being good and selfless. I told myself I was being noble, but really, I was disappearing. That letter was a mirror, showing me a self I had forgotten existed. And for the first time in decades, I made a decision. It is not too late that I was 72 years old. Most people think that at that age, the chapters of life are closing, but I decided mine were just beginning. I enrolled in community college. Literature, art history, philosophy, subjects I had dreamed of studying my entire life. I was the oldest in the classroom, and I loved every second of it. For the first time in decades, my mind felt alive that I traveled. Small trips at first, places I had always longed to see, but had always postponed for someone else. And each trip, each class, each moment I spent nurturing my own curiosity reminded me that life was still mine to live. I also began to practice something I had never truly allowed myself. Saying no at first, it was terrifying. My children called, expecting me to help, and I said, "I'm sorry, I have plans." My friends invited me to social obligations I didn't want to attend, and I said, no, thank you. I expected the world to collapse. I expected disappointment, anger, estrangement. But it didn't happen. People adjusted. And I felt lighter than I had in decades. For the first time, I realized that a woman can exist fully, with boundaries and dreams, without diminishing the love she gives to others. That giving yourself permission to be alive does not take away from anyone else. It enhances life itself. I spent 72 years waiting for permission that I would never receive. And that was my greatest mistake. But discovering it, even late, gave me the courage to finally step into my own life. After that letter, after all those years of waiting and giving, I realized something crucial. I had spent 60 years living everyone else's life but my own. And now, for the first time, I understood that it was never too late to start. That I was 72, yes, but age had never been the obstacle. The real obstacle had been my own fear. Fear of judgment, fear of disappointing others, fear of stepping outside the good woman mold I had been taught to inhabit. I had believed that selflessness was the ultimate virtue, and that pursuing my own desires was selfish. I had been wronged, so I began to live deliberately, moment by moment, decision by decision. I went back to school with the same eagerness I had as a young woman, but now with no apologies, no compromises. I asked questions, shared opinions, debated ideas, and reveled in the joy of learning for myself, not for anyone else. My classmates were often decades younger, and at first that intimidated me. But soon I realized something profound. Curiosity, passion, and the hunger for knowledge do not age. They only grow stronger when given space to breathe. Travel became another way I reclaimed my life. I took small trips at first to places I had always wanted to see. Every journey was a statement. I was no longer waiting for permission. I was no longer invisible in my own story. Standing in ancient ruins, walking along unfamiliar streets, breathing in foreign air, I felt my own pulse, my own heartbeat, and I remembered the woman I had buried long ago. But reclaiming myself was not just about doing things. It was about saying no. And that was harder than anything else. Saying no to family, to friends, to routines I had carried for decades, felt almost sinful at first. I feared they would be angry. I feared they would be disappointed. But each time I said no, I felt my shoulders lighten, my chest expand, and my voice grow stronger. And nothing terrible happened. Life continued. People adjusted. Respectfully, gently, but firmly, I began to set boundaries. I started to understand the fundamental truth about being a woman in my generation. Nobody is going to hand you permission to exist fully. Nobody is going to tell you that your dreams matter, that your needs matter, that your happiness matters. You have to take it. You have to claim it. And claiming it is an act of courage, not arrogance. And reclaiming myself, I discovered joys I had long forgotten. I loved literature the way I had in my youth, but now with depth and perspective. I appreciated art not just as decoration, but as a language that spoke to the soul. I found that even ordinary moments, sipping tea in quiet mornings, watching the sunlight fall across the floor, listening to music alone, could feel like treasures when claimed fully for myself. I also found that living for myself did not diminish my love for others. I could be a grandmother, a daughter, a friend, and still nurture my own life. In fact, I became a better mother, a better friend, a better human being, because I was no longer depleted. Love flows strongest when it comes from a cup that is full, not empty. The most difficult lesson, though, was forgiveness, particularly forgiving myself. For decades, I had believed that wanting more, saying no, pursuing my own desires, were acts of selfishness. I carried guilt for the years I had postponed myself. But I learned that self-love is not selfish. It is survival. Self-love is the foundation upon which everything else stands. At 78 now, I can say this with certainty. I am not someone's wife. I am not someone's mother. I am not a helper or a caretaker defined by obligation. I am simply me. A woman who loves learning, who explores the world, who sets boundaries, who says yes when she wants, no when she means it, and unapologetically takes up space in a world. Yet, even as I revel in my freedom, I cannot escape the regret of lost time. 60 years, decades of my life, spent waiting, saying yes, shrinking myself. I cannot get those years back. I cannot recover the moments I could have lived fully, the dreams I could have pursued, the risks I could have taken, and that is why I speak now. To you, whoever you are, do not wait. Do not postpone yourself for the comfort of others, for duty, for fear, or for perfection. The world will continue to ask for your yes, for your sacrifice, for your compliance. But you are allowed to answer differently. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to be whole. Now, at 78, I can finally speak with clarity about what I have learned. And the truth is simple, yet powerful. Life is happening right now. Not tomorrow, not after the kids are grown. Not when things calm down. Right now, for decades, I believed I had time. I told myself, I'll do it later. After my family is settled. After my husband retires. After my responsibilities are handled. I waited for permission that would never come. And in waiting, I lost 60 years of my life. 60 years in which I could have explored, studied, traveled, created, or simply been. That I do not say this lightly. Those years are gone, never to return. I can never reclaim the mornings, the afternoons, the years when I set aside my own desires for everyone else. And I feel that loss every single day. It is painful, but it is also instructive. If I could go back, if I could whisper in my younger self's ear, I would say this: you are not selfish for wanting more. You are not selfish for having dreams. You are not selfish for taking care of yourself. You are not selfish for saying no when it matters. You are not selfish for leaving behind situations that diminish you. You are not selfish for taking your life into your own hands. There will always be reasons to wait. Someone will always need you. Someone will always depend on you. Someone will always have expectations. But waiting for the perfect moment or for everyone else's approval will cost you more than you realize. It will cost you yourself. I am living proof. I waited decades. I postponed my life. And it was only after everything I had clung to, my husband, my family's constant needs, my routines, that I had the chance to find myself again. And even then, it took courage, persistence, and a willingness to feel fear and discomfort. But here is the remarkable part: it is never too late. At 72, I enrolled in college, traveled, and began reclaiming my voice. I said yes to experiences I had long denied myself. I said no to obligations I no longer wanted to carry. I discovered joy, curiosity, and freedom in ways I had forgotten existed. And now, I am living for me. For the first time in decades, I feel fully present in my own life. I wake up each day excited about what I will learn, what I will see, what I will experience. I am unapologetically myself. And it is beautiful. Yet the regret lingers. 60 years lost cannot be erased. But sharing my story, perhaps, can prevent someone else from making the same mistake. Perhaps it can inspire someone to stop waiting, to take their dreams seriously, and to claim their life today. Do not make my mistake. Do not wait for permission to live fully. Do not let fear, duty, or guilt keep you small. Do not shrink yourself for the comfort of others. Your life is not a rehearsal. It is not a practice run. It is the one life you will ever have. You can love your family and your friends. You can be kind, generous, and responsible. But you must never forget yourself. You must never forget that your dreams matter, that your voice matters, that your presence matters. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to exist fully. You are allowed to be more than what others expect of you. If you want to go back to school, start today. If you want to change careers, take that first step now. If you want to travel, see new places, or simply spend time alone discovering yourself, do it. The only thing standing in your way is the fear of being judged, of disappointing others, of stepping outside the role you have been taught to inhabit. Step outside anyway. I am 78 years old. I have spent only the last 6 years truly living for myself. And those 6 years have been the richest, most joyful, most fulfilling years of my life. I have learned to love myself, to honor my own needs, and to embrace the freedom of choice. And I want you to know, you still have time. But only if you start now. The permission is granted. Stop waiting. Claim your life. Chase your dreams. Speak your truth. Say no when you mean no, and yes when you mean yes. Take up space in this world unapologetically, because life will not wait for you. And neither should you. The choice is yours. But make it today.